can't believe fall is just around the corner. It's fall recipe time, and I'm all for cozy recipes. I'm kind of ready for it, although I'm sad to see summer go, but I've got my pumpkin pie spice tea latte here. I'll show you in a minute how to make this pumpkin pie spice syrup. It's tasty and it's really warming. I've got my first can of pumpkin for the season, and I'm gonna make pumpkin spaghettios. In this video, I'll also make a beef Philly pasta. Again, really tasty and great to make for yourself and your family. I'm so excited to share this pumpkin spice latte syrup. It's phenomenal. My husband is a coffee drinker, I'm a tea drinker, and we both loved it in coffee and tea. So it's very easy. You saw all the ingredients, just 5 ingredients, and doesn't take very long to come together. So it's reduced fat coconut milk, a whole can, and you just cook that for about 15 minutes, stirring pretty frequently. And then I added in a cup of brown sugar. You could probably use coconut sugar or regular sugar. And then you just kind of stir that, cook that for a little bit until it dissolves. Add some pumpkin pie spice. I also added a little bit of salt and some vanilla extract. I added the vanilla once I turned off the heat. And then you just simmer it for 15 minutes. I only did 11 minutes, and it was a very thick syrup. It was totally okay. It worked good. But you definitely don't even have to cook it that long, at least at the temperature that I was cooking it at. I put it in a mason jar, then stored it in the fridge, and I just stirred it as needed because it does separate a tiny bit. And I made it about a week ago, and we have like probably 2 servings left. It's just so great. It has a really subtle sweet and like pumpkin spice flavor, but it adds just a depth to your drink. Very, very good. Adding this syrup to tea or coffee just makes it a little bit special and fun. I've had it with hot tea and iced tea. I'll show you how I make the tea here. We'll sometimes like froth it with milk and then add it as like a cold foam kind of on top. But usually I've just been mixing it directly in the tea. I'll make like a half water, half milk latte with the tea, and then I'll just add this pumpkin spice syrup. It's so good. I do a similar thing with coffee for my husband where it's just half milk, half water. Add the coffee or espresso, add the syrup. It's like going to a cafe, but at home. I loved it so much that I actually just made an apple spice syrup yesterday, so I'll put that in the next video. So next I go ahead and make dinner. So this is actually a homemade artisan bread. I've done sourdough, and I do sourdough sometimes, but this is not sourdough. It's like the first non-sourdough artisan bread that I've ever done. And it's flavored with garlic and Italian seasoning and Parmesan. It was delicious. It was easy, less time consuming than sourdough for sure. But I will say it was not a perfectly done process. It was too sticky, I think, because I didn't let the yeast proof rise long enough. I don't think I let it rise long enough before I started shaping it. I was just impatient and I wanted it to be ready for dinner time. So I think that was why it was sticky and a little harder to work with. I've done quite a few sourdough loaves, but never with inclusions. This is my first inclusion loaf. I didn't really look up how to fold it, so that could have been different than it should have been as well. And then also, even though I temp checked it with a thermometer, I took it out a little bit too early, so I did cut it in half, and then I ended up putting it back in the Dutch oven and back in the oven to cook for a little bit longer. But even with all of those mistakes, this bread turned out really well, so I definitely recommend it if you want to go ahead and give it a try. The flavor and the texture were very good. I will say if you're new to bread making, this recipe didn't have a lot of detail, so you might want to look elsewhere for information on rise, kneading, shaping, and all of that stuff. Now let's move on to the entree, which is pumpkin spaghettios. One change I am going to make is I'm going to use chicken broth instead of apple cider. It is a couple weeks before this video is posted right now, so it's not quite fall, and so they didn't have apple cider in the store, so I'm going to use chicken broth. I'll also use this instead of part of the water, but I'll show you how that works. The thing I'm probably most excited for this recipe is actually the fried sage. I've done fried sage before in a butternut squash lasagna. I've never filmed that. Maybe I'll get around to filming that this fall or winter. But fried sage is so good. It's crispy. It adds some great flavor. So I'm really excited about that part of this recipe. The first thing I did for this recipe is brown butter. I don't brown butter very often, but I love brown butter chocolate chip cookies. And this pasta recipe was really good with brown butter, so I'm really excited to try some others with it as well. But what I did is I cooked the butter until it browned, added in sage, and cooked that for a couple of minutes. Then I took the sage out because I didn't want the sage to stay in there. That would have been way too strong. Sage is a very strong flavor. I seasoned it with garlic powder, salt, and pepper, and the tiniest bit of dried thyme. And then added in pumpkin puree. You could see I added in some broth. You could use beef or chicken broth. I like to use a recipe as a base and then kind of make it my own. But you could see I put the lid on. I did cook it for about 5 minutes before I realized, hey, why don't I just add the pasta in and cook it all together? So I did that and it worked out perfectly. So it was quicker to make and it worked out well. But close to the end, I added in a half cup of heavy cream and some Parmesan, and that's it. I served it up with some extra sage, well, I guess some sage on top that I just kind of crushed up in my hand, and then I added some Parmesan at the end as well and really good. And although I did like this recipe, my whole family liked this recipe, I do actually like pumpkin mac and cheese better. So if I have the chance, I'll make that recipe and I'll show you that this fall. But we did enjoy it. I do feel like the apple cider would have made a very big difference because it is sweet and it has a very different flavor profile than just broth. So I think if I added a little bit of sugar or maple syrup, I might have liked it a little bit better and associated that more with like a pumpkin, sweet and savory pumpkin flavor, but we liked it. I would recommend being careful and light-handed with the sage, though. It has a very strong flavor, as does thyme, in my opinion. So you just need like the tiniest bit, but it's so crispy because the sage was fried in that brown butter. So it's just a perfect topping. It was so good. But now you can see I'm taking out the bread. So at this point, it's done. It's, well, mostly fully cooked. Like I said earlier, I did put it back in the oven. But even with all these mistakes on the bread, it turned out great. So I'd say, if you're interested in trying an easier homemade bread recipe, definitely check this one out. And if you're looking for more detail, just look up a different recipe that has more specific instructions. But it's great if you're a beginner or not, I think. And I haven't made a ton of bread, but I do really like making bread. Next, I'm going to move on to this beef Philly pasta. I think it's supposed to be a take on like Philly cheesesteak, but in a pasta form. We also loved this recipe. I like to prep earlier in the day, a lot of times for dinner, and I like to do all the chopping and the shredding. When I was making this recipe, I did just do it at dinner time, right when I was making the recipe. So I go ahead and dice up 1.5 peppers and also half an onion, and I shred up some cheddar. I also measure Parmesan. I do half cheddar, half Parmesan. I also went ahead and prepped the veggie we were going to have for dinner, which are these carrots. They're from Trader Joe's. They're these kind of more petite carrots, and they're already peeled for me, which is actually honestly the reason I bought them. But I did go ahead and slice most of them in half, and there was a couple big ones that I sliced in quarters. And I did cut off the top, which would look really pretty too, but I just wanted to cut it off. And then I seasoned it with olive oil and salt and put it on a baking sheet and got that going in my countertop oven at 425. And then I start on the pasta. So I cook ground beef. Once that is in the pan and chopped up a little bit, I add in those diced peppers and onion, and then I season it up with garlic powder, onion powder, and some fresh parsley that I just kind of tear apart with my hands. And I also de-stemmed it. I also seasoned with salt, pepper, paprika, and Montreal steak seasoning just for kind of a variety of flavor. Once the ground beef was fully cooked, I added in beef broth, a whole carton, so 4 cups, plus 1 cup of water. And then before it even heated up, I just added the pasta in right away and just let everything cook together. Can you tell my new favorite way to make pasta is just cooking it in with the liquid before it even comes to a boil? I did push the pasta down so as much of the pasta was covered in liquid as possible. It wasn't fully covered, but I put a lid on to help it kind of steam and I stirred it every couple of minutes. And then once the pasta cooked maybe for 10 minutes. I took the lid off and cooked it for the rest of the time without the lid. I didn't want too much of the liquid to evaporate before the pasta had a good chance of cooking. Once the pasta was fully cooked, I added in a couple of tablespoons of flour, stirred that up, and cooked it for a couple of minutes. Then I added in some heavy cream. I did taste it at this point to make sure that I liked all of the spice level, and I added more seasonings at that time. Then I went ahead, added in that cheese. I also added fresh parsley, and that's this pasta done. Easy, quick, delicious, and unique, I think. So then, once the carrots were a little over, like 3/4 of the way done cooking, I did flip them over, cooked them a little bit longer, and then I seasoned them with garlic and pepper. I just like to do that kind of close to the end of cooking. I also sometimes use roasted garlic powder, like roasted garlic powder, and then I will just put that on at the end since it's already cooked. But we all loved this dinner. I actually made it again since filming this a couple of weeks ago. And it's simple, easy, it's a lot of food, good amount of protein. We really like it. So I really hope you enjoy all these recipes. Definitely give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. I'd love to have you back again. And be sure to leave me your favorite cozy or fall recipes in the comments. I can't wait to read them. Bye.